Hi, I'm Deboki and this is Okie Dokie Boki, and today I want to talk about third acts in romance, which is mostly an excuse for me to gush about my new favorite Korean drama, Romance is a Bonus Book. This video is inspired by a conversation that I saw happening on Twitter a few weeks ago. I think a few weeks ago, maybe like almost a month at this point. And so I am getting to this very late. I think it started with Mina over at Mina Reads, who tweeted out about how she wished that authors of romance would stop doing that thing where you get to the third act of the romance novel and like the couple breaks up, but then like they get back together, usually like in some kind of dramatic gesture. From my corner of Twitter, what I saw were a lot of readers who agreed with her, as well as a lot of writers who agreed with her. But I think also there were writers who didn't. And I'm not really gonna like argue too much about why someone may or may not agree with this viewpoint. I don't know, authors are allowed to write whatever books they want, and like readers expressing their personal feelings on a trope are like speaking like as consumers. As a mass, like yes, our opinions are relevant in the sense that like it is a thing that shapes what is getting bought and like in what numbers and stuff like that. But no single reader is in a position of authority over what anybody else produces. I've seen suggestions that this conversation became more fraught, and maybe it's just like a lot of the tricky dynamics that happens between readers and writers on the internet, because like there is a lot of both, and like that community can sometimes be a strange thing to navigate. I personally, like as you will see throughout this video, I agree with Mina and her take overall, but I like couldn't believe that there is a part of Twitter where this conversation turned into something different, and maybe it began to feel like more of a directive. I'm not really sure, right? Because again, I'm just strictly speaking from what I saw on my corner of the internet. But I do want to say that like no author is obligated to take any of our individual opinions into account. Like to begin with, no single person is the only reader of a book. Hopefully. I mean, I guess maybe there are some books that have only been read by one person, but most of the time, no single one of us are the only readers. And so like regarding issues of taste or personal preference, there's no reason for our opinion to be more important to an author when they're creating their work than anyone else's. I think that if we have learned anything from the Veronica Mars movie, it is that fan service will set your future work up for failure. Our choice to give an author our time or money, like it certainly entitles us to have feelings about a book and to share those feelings with like other readers and potential readers. Ultimately, it is the author's job just to produce a book that is based on their vision, not ours. So like, you know, it is not their responsibility to engage with our opinions in a way that we think of as constructive. When we are expressing our feelings about what we want out of our books, whether they're books that we've already read or books that we want to read in the future, that is not constructive criticism. That is just our opinion. With all of that said, today I'm going to be talking about why I too hate the third act breakup. And for me, this is strictly for me, it is because I am so fucking boring. I've been a romance reader for a very long time, and I think I've always been drawn to the story element of the genre and the tension that underlines it, but also the fact that you know that that tension is going to pay off in a happy ending. I like having that tension with a little bit of certainty there. And so I think when I was younger, I really appreciated like the chase element of a romance novel, of like learning how the characters are getting together. And that is still a thing I love. Like I still love the like will they, won't they, even though you know the answer is yes, they will. But I am also getting older and maybe also a little bit more boring. So I'm like also reaching a point in my life where what I appreciate more and more is like the romance of like really knowing a person, both like in extraordinary ways, but also in really dumb, boring, mundane ways. And that is a thing that you can see in both like a chase story or a slow burn. For example, a big part of the romance in Pride and Prejudice is knowing how much better Elizabeth and Darcy understand each other by the end of the novel. Like I think a lot of the effectiveness of like maybe the last quarter of that book is built on how much Elizabeth is expressing like her understanding of Darcy. So I think what I've like really been on the lookout for in romance novels are examples where we can like see couples actually function together as a couple. Like I really want to read about couples who have enough like trust and functionality and sweetness together that I could read them like doing their taxes and still be like, oh. And that brings me to Romance is a Bonus Book, a 2019 Korean drama starring Lee Na-young as Kang Da-ni, a 37-year-old woman who had left a successful career in advertising after becoming a mother. At the beginning of the show, she has just been divorced for over a year and is trying to get a job because the responsibility of her daughter's welfare has ended up like entirely on her shoulders, but no one will take her seriously because of this huge gap in her resume. She ends up finding work as a temp worker at a publishing company where her best friend Cha Eun-ho has been working. Eun-ho is played by Lee Jong-suk, who apparently keeps starring in shows about writers and writing, which I really kind of love for him. Eun-ho is younger than Dani, but they've been friends since they were both children, and over time his affection for her has grown romantic, but he's kept that to himself because, you know, she has been in the significant relationship for a large part of her adult life. She in turn has basically always seen him as a little brother, which is obviously tough for him, but he values their friendship and kind of just like, you know, pines when she's not looking. This all gets tougher when he learns that Dani has been hiding the truth of her divorce and career challenges from him, and he's just like, you know, like, stay here with me while, like, she's gotten this job already, like, but he didn't know that she was applying for it until he, like, she showed up in the interview. But, like, so yes, all of this is getting complicated now, and so things happen. Romance ensues. It's all very sweet. And truly, this is such a sweet show. I sometimes struggle with friends to lover romances because I've read a few where there are, you know, some real boundary issues, like, especially like when one protagonist shows any interest in another character and like, but you know that they're friends with this other person who like they're pretending not to have an interest, and you know, like that kind of boundary stuff. And this show has love triangles, which I also usually hate and like would also hate more because of those boundary issues. But I think the show wields both aspects of the plot like really gently and also gives heart to all of the characters involved, so it never feels like it's just centered on these two characters at the expense of anyone else. It also uses these moments to really have Eun-ho call himself out for the ways he's expressing his jealousy, which I also really appreciated. This is also a workplace romance, which I have talked about recently also in terms of like how boundaries can get fraught in that kind of setting. And this show to me continues to establish that you can do like a good, strong, romantic workplace story with less of a concern about whether or not the romances are causing like dysfunctional workplaces if you actually let the characters have their own lives, if you really like flesh out that workplace setting. And even like not thinking about the romance side, I really love the use of the workplace in this show because of like how it's used to show so many different iterations of being a working woman, like whether you're a woman really early in your career, like still kind of like moving into a mentor stage, or someone who's like been there for a while and like what you've had to do to be able to hold on to your career. It shows so many different versions of like each stage of that career journey for women. With Dani, we're really getting a lot of the struggles of re-entering the workplace, but the show is very deliberate about showing marriage and career from a number of different perspectives. And I think one of the strongest parts becomes the way that Dani connects with the other women in her job who are in the same age group as her, but who have made different personal choices that have, you know, necessarily interwoven in with their professional ones. The workplace in this show is a publishing house, so, you know, there's the romance, which is one heart of the show, but I think the other real heart of the show is books, which is part of why I thought it'd be fun to talk about on BookTube. And so we're really getting to see books get made at like a whole bunch of different stages. We're watching editors talk about them, we're watching them get printed, we're watching marketers talk about how they want to like market the book. At every step, you're watching people who are involved with like making these books talk about what they're doing, why they're doing it, and why it matters to them, and like just the level of pride they take in that individual step that they are responsible for. And not every character starts out in the show as a book person, so it's really meaningful to watch how that journey shapes for them, because yeah, every single one like has sort of their own different like source of pride when it comes to what it means for them to be involved with publishing any single book. But to bring this back to the original conversation around like romance and third acts, again, the heart of the show is Eun-ho's and Dani's romance. And a thing that I really appreciated about it and that I think needs to be stated is also just how understated this romance is. The romance builds in a very gradual way, so when things click into place, it's without a lot of the theatrics that we might usually associate with romance. And this perfectly suits the characters and their pre-existing relationships. Dani is 37 and she's also kind of just over this shit. In the first episode, she like outright rejects the idea of like a fairy tale romance because she just wants a good life and she wants to be able to take care of herself and her daughter. And she and Eun-ho have known each other for so long that the idea of a dramatic gesture is rooted in knowing each other in like really much more subtle ways, which I actually think is pretty romantic. And part of what I love, related to what I said earlier about just like wanting to watch couples do like their taxes together, is that you kind of get like their own version of those moments. There's an extended scene of them just cleaning a house together, which should be so boring, but it's not, at least not to 30-year-old me. It lets you see how their relationship works even out of like an obviously romantic context. And so you get to see the love that's there like even before the romance like fully kicks in for them. And at first I was kind of tempted to write off just how quiet their romance was despite it being so like central to the show, especially in that last third of the show. But I liked it because like a lot of books that, you know, eschew the sort of third act breakup, what they actually end up having to do is rely on external challenges to show us how far the couple has come. I think part of the problem with the third act breakup, and this is not universal, this does not go for all like iterations of it, but often the source of these breakups are miscommunication. And so a big frustration is just sort of that feeling of like, use your words, you know, like just talk to each other, right? And so often in those situations, like them getting back together doesn't actually really address the underlying issue. Like, yes, there's the surface issue that they broke up over. The real underlying issue that it's gonna keep coming back, and I'm sorry, I feel like I'm getting very fake couple counseling here, and this is just me having like watched too many dramatic bullshit scenes. The real underlying issue is the communication problem, right? And so like, unless you're gonna prove that in the future you're going to use your words, I often come out of those books like feeling less convinced of their compatibility than when I went in. And so I get the notion that the third act has to have something dramatic, but that's why I like the idea of instead of having the couple break up, keep them together and like throw them at a problem. And you can like actually show a lot about them that way. You can show a lot about them in their individual kind of sense, and you can show the way that they've grown since the beginning of the show, the book, the whatever. You can reframe parts of their personality that might have seemed like flaws. You can show how they express support for each other. You can see how they work as a team. There's just so many other things that you can show that are not just like they don't know how to communicate. And like, I am expressing strong negative feelings about the third act breakup, but like, obviously it's not inherently bad. And I've read and enjoyed plenty of books that have them and will probably continue to do so. In the hands of a good writer, they can be a way to examine like the whole cast of a book, or like they might be a way to, I don't know, wrap up loose narrative threads. Like there is a purpose for it. It's not like it's a useless thing. But the books and shows that have stuck with me the longest are probably the ones that, in addition to making their characters compelling, also are able to let them be a little bit boring as well, even if the world around them isn't. Romance is dramatic, yes, but for me, the drama only pays off if you actually buy that the characters are still going to want to be together after the story ends. And sometimes the best way to do that is with a little quiet. So thank you guys for watching. Let me know about your feelings about the third act breakup and whatever down below. And if you have recommendations for other Korean dramas, let me know. I'm kind of like re-entering my Korean drama phase of binging a bunch of them because it's very good. It's very fun to watch. So yeah, thank you guys for watching. Bye.